Hello everyone. My name is Robert Hall. Today I'm going live to discuss the Godox QT1200 Model 3 version. This is an upgrade to the Godox QT1200 Model 2 version, a light that I've used before. And today we're going to just go through, I'm going to tell you all about the light. I'm going to talk to you about specifically its upgrades and differences versus both the AD series at large as well as the QT Series 2. And we'll go over everything it has to offer, and then we're going to get into some live shooting. So I will demonstrate a few of the capabilities of it live best I can, and I've also got a few video clips to run throughout this that will demonstrate some more technical details that are a little bit more difficult to illustrate live. So let me just do a quick health check here and make sure that everything is running. Yes, I just saw myself. And another thing, we have comments enabled across the platforms. So wherever you are viewing this, whether it's on Godox Facebook page or the Godox YouTube page, I can see those comments, and we will be doing a Q&A session towards the end here. So feel free to litter this with comments as we go through some of the details, and I will either answer them live or wrap up and answer them at the end of this live stream. All right, so definitely got some notes here because there are some numbers that are a little bit tough to remember. But let's talk about the QT series in general. I have the QT1200 Model 3, which is the largest version. As you can see, this is a pretty large light right here. It is 9.5 pounds, and for anybody outside the US, that is 4.3 kilograms. And again, this is the largest version. It is the 1200 watt second version, which is also the most powerful one available. But there are two other versions of this, just like in the QT Series 2 lighting. There is a QT400 Mark III and a QT600 Mark III. Now the QT400 and the QT600 are both a little bit more compact and a lot lighter. So the QT400 is a 6.6 pound light, that is 3 kilograms even, and the QT600 Mark III is 7.2 pounds or 3.3 kilograms. All right. Now that's the sizing really didn't change much. That is very similar to the previous series. But what did change, the big changes from the QT Mark II series, one would be the fact that they switched from an incandescent modeling lamp to a LED modeling lamp. So now we have a 40 watt modeling lamp in here. I can probably actually turn this and light myself in the video with it. But we've got a 40 watt modeling lamp that I'm just gonna bounce up there. Hopefully put a little bit more light on me for this live stream. But that LED modeling lamp obviously generates a lot less heat than the 150 watt incandescent modeling lamp that was on the previous versions, and in general is just a little bit more modern. Gives you roughly the same luminance in terms of using it for modeling purposes, so that's really nice. Now the QT series, if you're completely unfamiliar with it, it is the series of lighting from Godox that is most focused on action stopping potential, right? Freezing action. That is what this light is designed to do more than anything else. So that has a few nuances that make it differ from the AD series of lighting that we will cover today. This is the only IGBT series of strobes that are AC powered. So the entire AD series of lighting, 8600 Pro, 1200 Pro, 8400 Pro, 200, all of those lights are IGBT strobes, but the other AC strobes that Godox offers are not IGBT. And this is where this differs. This is the flagship strobe, which is why it has that IGBT functionality and why it has those really, really short flash durations. So the QT1200 has both a speed mode and a color stable mode, or a regular mode, I guess you could call it. And the action freezing potential of its speed mode is just ridiculous. It's more than any of the other lights. Another change that they made from the previous series is the addition of a minimum power level of 1/256. So the previous QT series only got down to 1/128. This one gets down to 1/256, which means even shorter maximum flash durations. So we will show some of that action freezing. I've got some clips of like the most ridiculous freezing splatter water water splashes everywhere, but we're also going to try to demonstrate it in studio, and I'm going to show you how it differs from, say, an 8400 Pro as well. So yeah, this is an AC powered strobe, so if you wanted to try to use this on location, it would require some type of external power source, right? A battery pack, a really long cable to connect to somewhere indoors, a generator, you get the idea. You would need some type of thing to take it outdoors. So this is definitely geared more towards studio usage, where you have AC outlets wherever you need them. There was also, in the previous series of QT lights, there was I believe a 110 volt and a 220 volt option, and that is gone. There is only one version of this, so no matter where you are in the world, what type of power you're using in the world, you know, this will work with it. You don't have to worry about getting the correct voltage for it. There was also, like, that gave you different types of action stopping potential depending on which model you had. So it's nice that it's a lot simpler with this QT1200 version 3. We also have that 10 stop control on here. And if you're using the 80 series of lighting, then this is going to be really familiar to you. I mean, this is compatible with the entire X series lineup of lighting. So you've got high-speed sync on here. You've got the manual control. You've got a speed mode and a color stable mode, which if you use any of the Godox 80 series of lights, the Pro series, those all have a color stable mode and a normal mode as well. Familiarity on the back is going to be high for you guys. I mean, this display just looks a lot like everything else. Everything is in the same place if you're already used to it. So on the back, you can see the power level, the group that you're in, the channel that you're in, as well as the T.1 flash durations. And right now I'm going to pop over to the custom function menu here, and we are going to turn on the speed mode. So you do have to do this within the custom functions, change the speed mode. And now you can see if I lower this power level down all the way to 1256, we see that we have a T.1 flash duration of 1/23,400, which is ridiculously short. So that means that this essentially has a shutter speed of 1/23,000, and that means that it's going to, no matter what you throw at it, it's going to freeze it and carve it out in really good detail. All right, now I want you guys to be able to see the difference from this versus a 80 series light. And I think the 8400 Pro is probably one of the most popular 80 series of lights. So I did make a little clip that demonstrates the same physical action from being taken on an 8400 Pro and with the QT1200 Pro. And I show you guys in detail. So while I set up for the live shooting, I am going to roll that clip just so you guys can see that, and then we'll get into demonstrating this guy live. All right. Let's go.
Okay, before we get to the live shooting portion of this live stream, I wanted to share with you something that illustrates the difference between the Godox QT series and the Godox 80 series. So on the left here, we have a shot that is lit with the Godox QT1200 Model 3, and on the right here, we have a Godox 8400 Pro lighting the shot. Now, everything in these two shots is the same. The flashes are in the same ambient environment. We have the same camera settings. The flashes are in the same position with the same modifier and the same distance from the subject. The only thing that changed between these two shots is the strobe. Now, here is what the model is doing. She's bringing her foot upwards for this final position. So this would kind of be the go-to shot. But what I wanted to illustrate here is what happens when you actually have motion, when you have something moving rapidly across the frame. And that's what's happening here as we capture the foot as it's traveling up to that final position. So if I zoom in 1:1 on the left here, you can see that the leg is perfectly sharp, right? Hand is frozen, leg perfectly sharp, all the way down to the toe, perfectly sharp. But on the right, the shot with the 8400 Pro, you see what looks almost like an out of focus leg, but in reality, it's not out of focus, it's motion blur. Now for all the way out here, the foot is really blurry, and as we move in on the leg, you can see that it gets less blurry. And the reason for that is that this foot is the fastest moving part, right? It is the most outward part, it's experiencing the most rotational movement, whereas this leg lower leg area is moving a little bit slower, and this leg is part of the leg is not moving very fast at all. So that's why the foot is extremely blurry. Now there are two reasons that this happens. One is the fact that the QT1200 is geared towards having shorter T.1 flash durations. T.1 flash duration is the time that it takes the flash to go from its peak brightness to 10% of its peak brightness. And the faster that happens, the more action stopping potential that there is. So the Godox QT series is designed with its speed mode to have the best T.1 flash durations that are available on the entire Godox X series. That's both relative to the power, relative to the size. They are just absolutely the best option available for anything freezing action. Now there is a second reason contributing to this, and that's the fact that we have a 1200 watt second strobe versus a 400 watt second strobe, and both of these strobes are IGBT strobes. Now I'm not going to get into the technology aspect or how IGBT functions or differs from voltage controlled flashes, but all you need to know is that on any IGBT strobe, like the QT1200 or like anything in the 80s series, as you bring the power output down, the T.1 flash duration gets shorter, meaning their action stopping potential gets better. So if you are trying to freeze action with any Godox strobe, any Godox 80 series strobe, or the QT series of strobes, the more you turn your output down, the faster they're going to be and the more action freezing potential that they're going to have. And in case you need an example of power levels that we're at, on the QT1200 Model 3 here, we're at about 1/16th power and it's stopping that foot in midair, and the Godox 8400 Pro was closer to 1/4 power and it's experiencing that motion blur there. So if you wanted to accomplish this look, this frozen look with an 8400 Pro, then you'd want to be all the way down at around 1/32nd power, which just means then you don't have the output necessary to facilitate these settings, and then your ambient light might be an issue. So you can see how using lights such as the 8400 Pro might not be the best option if you're trying to freeze action. In fact, what I've used previously to the QT series for my dance related shoots when I'm trying to get that perfect action, I primarily rely on the Godox 801200 Pro, although now in the future I'll probably use this QT1200. Here's just a few more examples with the QT1200 Model 3. These are at some really low outputs, such as like 1/64th, 1/128th, and as you can see, we have no motion blur whatsoever. Even in this fabric, you don't see any of the lines of fabric or tones of the fabric bleeding into one another. They are just perfectly carved out in every shot, and that all comes down to that really short flash duration. All right, now that you guys understand that, let's demonstrate some of these aspects live.
All right. That worked out well. All right, as you can see, we have Xena in the back here. On that box, we're going to do some basic action freezing photography here. Now, I do have a 3-light setup, and the first thing that I want to demonstrate to you guys is that the QT1200 Model 3 slots in perfectly with the other 80 series lights. Now, the really fast flash durations are in the speed mode. However, you can also get some pretty good short flash durations out of its regular mode. Like, it's still very powerful light and it still has solid flash durations even when you have the color stable mode on. So I'm going to set that up and we are going to turn speed mode off and just start with our color stable mode. And the reason for that is because I'm using it with the the Godox 801200. So we have 2 of them back there. There's one on the left in a reflector, and there's one on the right. Might be a little bit obstructed by this light, but there is a second one back here as well. And those are just creating some backlighting for our subject. And then I also have this large V-flat world V-flat, and the whole purpose of that is any light coming from these background lights, as well as light from here, is all bouncing back into the subject, just creating a little bit of fill light so it's not overly contrasty. Now, I believe my setup here, I have 1/128th power on both the 801200 Pros in the back as background lights, and then my A light is at 1/64th power plus 0.3. And I do want you guys to be able to see these, so I'm going to share my screen where I am tethered. via capture one. So let's see here if I can do that. There we go. Window, share. All right, so now you can still see us and the setup, and you can also see the full screen there. All right, so first thing we're gonna do is just a depth jump. Now, we intentionally have Zena's hair in a top bun because that is a place where we'll probably see a lot of motion blur in this, because if we're just doing lateral movements, it's not a lot of forward movement, so the motion blur isn't that crazy, but her hair will be bouncing all over the place, so that's where the action freezing will really show. All right, we'll do a quick setting check here. You can stay up there for a second, actually. There we go. We are connected to the PC, so I can't even see my photos. I don't believe our QT1200 is in the right group. Apologize, guys. I think I got a standby mode here. Ah. I was going through some settings, I accidentally turned the standby on. There we go. Or the delay function on, so it was trying to delay 30 seconds. Gotta watch those custom settings. I will say the QT1200 Model 3 is a little bit different in terms of control interface than the other lights because it actually has two dials to control everything. So one will turn an option on and off, whereas another will let you select between the different options. Okay, so going back here, this should look good, that looks good. All right, maybe we'll give a little bit more power on that key light. And final settings are 1/32 on A, the key light, the QT1200 Model 3, and then we've got the 1200 Pros are both still at 1/128. And I'm going to shoot in medium in terms of continuous, just so I can kind of fire away here. All right, go ahead. Now that is another massive benefit of the QT1200, is that we can recycle very rapidly. In fact, at its lowest power settings, you can start syncing with other cameras up to 20 frames per second, which is just ridiculous. And that actually came in handy when I was doing some splash photography to try and test this, because rather than try to time it perfectly and get all those water splashes in the air, all I had to do was fire away and fire through the action. So that was really cool. All right. Yeah, let's do it again. Good. So as you can see, all these frames being connected well. All right, we're gonna add in, look at that ponytail, just flying around. It's like straight up there. All right, so when you land and jump up, I want you to jump up and then suck your feet in like a tuck jump. All right, so bringing your knees up too, and still looking forward just like you were. But yeah, it's awesome to see that ponytail bouncing around there. And you know what? We're actually gonna pull that crate back a little bit. This way, I keep you more on the background there. All right. Just make sure that still looks bright enough. Yeah, I think once you step down there, we'll be okay. Ready. Go, let me see how that looked. Yeah, your ponytail is going all over the place. Okay, so let's zoom in there real quick and just see just how sharp that ponytail is. And that looks pretty good. It does look like there is a tiny bit of motion blur, so, well, maybe not. I think those are just little hairs in between there. Yeah, no, that looks great. Everything is carved out really well there. You still happy you decided to go live?
Yeah.
You're like, yeah, it's fun. It's just funny to see the pony. I'm really glad we did that with the ponytail because that's going to show up more than anything else.
My arms look huge. I don't like
You look strong. Your arms look ripped. All right, let's go for one more here. All right. Yep, get that tuck jump.
I don't know if my camera's gonna win. Oh.
Whew. All right, we're gonna try to push this sequence even more. So I'm going to increase the ISO a little bit on my camera, and I am going to drop the power output of all these lights to compensate. And we're gonna shoot in continuous high and see if it can keep up there. So I am at 1/64th power on the light right now. Because I dropped the power of the QT1200, when you're in that color stable mode, you do need to make sure that you dump it. So you have to hit the test button just to make sure that the power level is what you are set at. All right, so I'm ready. One more, go for it. Yeah, there we go. I think that's the highest I can do while shooting in RAW, which is, I believe, like 10 or 12 frames per second. That was crazy. You got up there. Boing. That's pretty cool.
That's funny.
That's a cool shot. All right, we're gonna add some color into the mix. So because she has blue and yellow on, I'm gonna put some gelled light on both of the background lights here. So I got yellow for one, blue for another. These are just very simple sheets of gel here.
We're doing blue and yellow.
What?
We're doing blue and yellow.
Blue on one, yellow on the other. So yeah, the whole goal here is for like the rear light on one side to be outlined blue and for yellow on the other side. All right. And, you know, I'm gonna flip over to my electronic shutter real quick. I am going to see if I can get even more frames per second out of this. So I have a Sony A1, which is one of the few cameras that actually fires a flash, even with the electronic shutter. You're down to 1/200th of a second in terms of your sync speed, but that feels pretty normal if you're used to flash photography. So let me get a quick test here. You don't have to do a jump right here. I just want to see. There we go. All right, did all those light? Sure did. All right. So I'm gonna fire away here and you guys are gonna see just how rapidly that this flash can fire. It continues. Yep, I'm ready now. Now that is what I'm probably most excited about with this QT series, at least when you're trying to do that action stopping. It really helps to be able to keep up with a really rapid sequence as well without having to like try and time that one perfect moment. And I'm thinking to dance photography specifically, when you're trying to capture somebody at the top of a jump. This really helps because you can shoot through that upper portion of the sequence rather than just try to time that one perfect moment. So I think it's going to make getting that select, that one image that's perfect, a lot easier. What about when you tuck, like launch, almost like as if you were going to hug your knees? Okay. Yeah, let's try that just to keep the arms forward for one. I'm going to make sure. There we go. It's looking good here. And I think if you have your camera on a tripod and use this conic light meter with Godox chip, you can fire the camera from Capture One and adjust the power on this conic light meter. What's up, Chris? Nice to see you too. All right, here we go. Ready? Your hair really got lit up there once you jumped up. There it goes. Yellow,
No?
yellow, 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 yellow. That's cool. Cannonball.
Oh, I see the blue.
Oh, look,
yellow.
we actually had a, looks like we finally beat it. Where it didn't quite keep up with one, but we have been firing it pretty rapidly. I don't know if that was just misfire or if we actually outdid it a little bit. But I like that one so far. Cannonball. Especially with the blue background, that looks like you're jumping into a pool here. All right, so we're gonna pop these out, and I'm going to demonstrate a little bit of what happens when you switch into the speed mode, because not only does it affect the actual speed that you're shooting at, right, those T.1 flash durations, but it does affect your color a little bit. A little bit, a lot of bit, depending on what power level you're at. So I'm pulling those, and the whole point here is so that the 801200 Pros are, they don't have any gels on them, because I want there to be some reference point for clean white light. And then this one, I will bring down the QT1200 Mark III. I'm going to bring down, and we are going to turn on the speed mode. So when you turn on the speed mode, of course, your flash durations get much shorter. Also, you no longer have to dump the power level, so you can freely change it and not have to worry about dumping it to adjust. But essentially, your T.1 flash durations get really, really short. And if you already know a lot about T.1 flash durations, I'll go through them really quickly on the full stops. At 1/256, we've got 1 over 23,400. At 1/128, we've got 17,100. 64th, 12,000. 32nd, 9,460. 16th power, 6,540. And 1/8, 4,270. And I won't get into the upper levels because, you know, if you're buying it for the flash freezing potential, then chances are you're not concerned about what it is at a quarter power. We can go off the box to like another jump, or like what we did first when we set up. We can do that jump instead. You got that, or you want me to grab it?
Let me see how heavy. Yeah, you might need to grab.
I didn't know I was going to be working out on stream today too. Oh, I'm glad you appreciate the warmth, or the warm temperature. We're having our first warm weekend in Michigan, so it's like 75 outside today. But it was cold all morning, so I turned the heat on, and now it is super hot in here, to me at least. She's like, I'm good. This is great. This is comfortable. All right. Let's get back in here. So, without changing anything else, power level, everything, go ahead and slide a little bit to your left for this first shot. I'm just going to take a quick shot of you because I just want people to see what is going to happen here. All right. So we now have the speed mode active. Right? And do you see in the skin, the colors of the skin look a little bit different. Now that is because the color balance and the tint, so the Kelvin temperature and the tint, when you are in speed mode, varies very wide. Goes all the way from around 6,000 all the way up to 9,000. So if you're planning on using the QT1200 Mark III and you're planning on using it for portraiture or any type of color critical work, then I highly recommend it be part of a series of QT1200 Mark III. Because if you're going after that action freezing potential and you're going to be using multiple lights, you want them all to have a similar color as well. Because this can present a challenge in editing, because I could modify my white balance for the QT1200, but then my background lights would be off. And either the front light or my two back lights would require a gel. So just be aware of that. If you're looking for this action freezing potential, I would strongly consider making sure to get all QT series lights from it. So let's go for that jump that we did earlier. 1, 2, 3. I'm ready. Oh, let's go back to continuous high. That made things so much easier. All right, ready. There we go. It just feels ridiculous with the flash keeping up with you that fast. But you can definitely see it on the key light that her skin looks, I would say, like a little bit on the blue side and a little bit on the green side. So we're getting, the light is a little bit too cool. We would want to add some warming gels to it to balance that. And then also looks like we need some magenta gels in order for it to balance with the QT1200 series. I want to just do a flexing shot.
Sure.
I would keep your head to your left just so it's towards that key light right there. Yeah, yep. Go. We definitely didn't need to shoot that in continuous high, but one more, bring your chin up a little bit higher. I've got that light a little too high for you since it was meant for the jump. There you go. Bang. That looks better. Does a really good job of carving all the muscles. Woo! Look at you. You look strong. I kind of want to hop in there. All right, let me flip. You can pause for a second if you want. Chill. I'm going to share with you guys another little clip here. I just want to make sure that you guys are seeing the white balance difference, and I also want you guys to see exactly what this can mean in a product environment, right? Because I'm showing with the human subject, and yes, we're freezing the subject, but respective to like splash photography, this isn't that rapid of movement. So I want you guys to see it in a different context because this does apply to product photography as well. And I also want you guys to see that color issue that I mentioned at every power level, just so you guys are aware of that going into it, and you can decide how many lights you need or if you're gonna have to set up like a gel situation to cover that. So let's bring this back up. All right. What is the difference in the 2 and 3 models? I will cover that again at the end because I did cover it right when I jumped in, but here we go. Let me bring up this other clip first.
Now, so far on this live stream, all we've really focused on is human subjects and the benefits to the action stopping potential in action photography or sports photography or anything fast moving. Now, there are other applications out there though, and probably one of the most popular would be any type of splash photography for any food or product photography. So this is still live, and I have to admit, this is not my forte. This is purely me messing around here. But I have to say the QT series made it really easy for 2 reasons. One, of course, it's ridiculously short flash duration when we were using a low power. But second, that 20 frames per second capability really came in handy when I paired this with my Sony A1. I wasn't having to time the shots perfectly to get the water splashing. Instead, I could just manually focus and just let it rip and capture the entire sequence of water splashing. And we got some pretty cool results by doing so. I'm just going to share a few here, and I want to show you that if we zoom in, just look at that water perfectly frozen into place. Every single drop of water that was lit is just hanging perfectly but carved out in such rich detail. So the QT series makes it easy for a number of reasons if you're trying to do any type of splash photography. Let's kick over to another example here. Now, it's important to recognize here, guys, this is a macro setting. This is a, 3-inch bottle of cologne, and we have water moving rapidly across the frame. If you're trying to freeze water in a portrait setting where you're including a whole human subject, it's easier because that water does not move as far across the camera sensor, right? It's a relative thing here, but when we're zooming in to water moving rapidly, it's much harder to freeze. Yet you can see the QT series has no problem. Every single droplet that you can find in any of these shots is just perfectly frozen. And the crazy thing here is, especially these big splashes, they almost look like they're glass or ice frozen in place. It does not look like it's something that's moving at all. But yeah, I just wanted to share this because if you're focused on product photography, splash photography, or you're using splash composite assets in your imagery, then I think you really need to consider the QT3 series because A, It's just capable of that, but B, that 20 frames per second when you're at those low output levels, which are the outputs that give you the best action stopping potential. So it's what you're using anyways. Being able to shoot at up to 20 frames per second just gives you more options. Instead of attempting this over and over again by redoing splashes and getting your studio even more wet, really with the QT series, all you have to do is just photograph the entire sequence in rapid succession. Just let the shutter rip on your camera, whatever the most frames per second that you can capture is, and this flash will keep up. Now, there's one more thing I want to make sure you're aware of when using the QT Series 3 strobes, and this applies to the QT2 series as well. That is how to deal with the color aspect of the speed mode. So, what I mean here is I've already shown you that you can use the QT series with any of the 80 series lights, and it's very easy for it to balance with any of the 80 series lights in terms of color. That's really important. You want, if you have color critical work, then you want all of your lights to basically have the same starting point in terms of Kelvin temperature and tint. That way, none of them are causing imbalances that you just have to fix in post. But if you're going to be using the speed mode, then you need to be aware of its color properties, because in the speed mode you can Kelvin temperatures all the way up to 8500, even 9000 Kelvin temperature, and a little bit of tint as well. If you see on the right hand side here, you can see the Kelvin temperature and the tint of these images. So this one, which I believe is at 1/128th power, we've got a Kelvin temperature of 8300 K and 30 tint. Plus 30 tint, so we're adding a lot of magenta because the light is green. If I made this 5600 and 0, right, we've got a very blue and very green image. So let's undo that. Now these lower powers are the ones that are in those 8000s, close to 9000 Kelvin temperature. Now the absolute highest number that I saw was at 1/64th power. We've got 9200 Kelvin, plus 32 on the magenta. So this is the one that needed the most correction, but from there we start getting to a more typical flash Kelvin temperature and a more neutral tint. So here at 1/32nd power, we are at 8200 Kelvin, 27 tint. Then we go down to 7400 Kelvin, 22 tint. 7100 Kelvin, right? You can see we're just getting closer and closer. 6900, 6800, 6650 at half power, 6550 at full power. And honestly, I think that's a little on the warm side. If I were correcting to I, I'd probably be more around like, probably around 6200. So you have to be aware of that, because what this means is if you're using your QT series flash to freeze action and you have other lights in your scene, as soon as you try to solve the color of the QT series, whatever your other flashes are doing, that's going to look a little bit off. So I recommend, if you are getting these for that action freezing potential and you plan on using 2-3 lights, then you're going to want 2 or 3 of these QT series lights, just so when you're freezing action, they are all in those high color temperatures and you can correct them all together. Now, if you don't want to go that route, say you only want to get one of these and then you're in a pinch and you end up using it with other 80 series lighting or other type of flash units that are at 5600 Kelvin, well, you're going to have to gel one of those, at least if you don't want to be correcting this in post. So in this instance, right, we'd want to add a warming gel to get this down to 5600 Kelvin. This is taking a lot of magenta correction, which means we'd want to add magenta to it at the source because it's too green. So we would want to add a magenta gel, and we would want to add a warming gel to get this down to balance with other flashes without any of these color issues.
All right, I'm coming back. I just want to be able to zoom in on this QT1200 for you guys. That way, when I answer any questions, you guys can see it nice and clearly. All right, so Richard had already asked what are the differences, and this is something that I quickly glossed over at the beginning. The first would be the LED modeling lamp. So switch to a 40-watt LED modeling lamp instead of a 150-watt incandescent modeling lamp, which just helps keep the studio a little bit cooler, a little bit more modern, and in line with the rest of the 80 series. A lot of people ask when we get into these 40-watt modeling lamps, like, can it also be a LED? Yeah, in a pinch you can do so, but their color temperature as well as like their color properties don't make it the best choice for video, and I'd much rather see somebody using something like a VL150 or even the ML series LEDs. I think are way better for light duty LED use. So, but yeah, you know, you could light a very close video with it if you wanted to. But it is very bright or bright enough for modeling in an indoor environment with Studio. So right now it's in the 90%, and you can see it's bouncing and lighting, but we're at some pretty strong video settings here of like f7.1. So it does work pretty well. Daylight coming in, and you can still see its effect as I turn it on and off, even when it's bouncing. So pretty strong LED light there. And I think it's good enough for using inside of a softbox indoors to light anybody with. The other big difference, besides how it was laid out, it's laid out a little bit differently than any of the 80 series lights. I quickly mentioned this earlier. We've got two knobs here. So when it goes to controlling things like custom functions, the right knob will change settings, whereas this one will change the custom function that you're on. So, and then when it comes to if you were modifying power on the back of the display, which I don't know why you would do because you've got that wireless control, you can also go up and down here, and then this will control your modeling lamp, which is nice to not be bouncing around to different buttons to like turn the modeling lamp on and off. You just have like full-time rapid control of the modeling lamp if you want to set it once and then forget it. Other than that, you've got the typical stuff. S1, S2, if you are using this in an optical flash sense, you've got the S1, S2 feature. For those who don't know, if you're trying to trigger this optically off of another flash, S1 will not ignore a pre-flash, S2 will ignore a pre-flash. Someone might have to correct me. I've literally never used it because I only use with a Godox trigger, a Godox capable trigger. But that's what the S1 and S2 functions are for. The other difference that they added is that minimum power setting of, oh, we're in high speed sync. Hello, how did we get there? The other difference is the addition of the 1256 power level, which when we are in the speed mode, let's turn that on real quick. We've got a T.1 flash duration of 1/23,400, which is lower than was available on the original QT1200, not the original, but the QT1200 Mark II. So faster maximum flash durations simply because we have a lower power level, so a lower minimum power level on the light. In terms of custom functions, you've got the speed mode would be the one that you're probably using the most, turning that on and off. You've got a delay function, masking function if you want to use this to create masks. Again, this is really powerful in product photography because you can have just your background light go off, which gives you a very clear mask to cut out the subject with. This is modeling lamp. Wait, I don't know what that setting is for. Custom function 4, I have a modeling lamp. I think this is whether proportionate mode is on or off. Custom function 5 is the ID function, which I accidentally have turned on before, so be careful with that. This dial is like very easy to move, so I accidentally turned on the ID and I was like, why can't I trigger my light? The ID function is a 2-digit number that you can assign to the light so that nothing else can trigger it unless it has the same ID on there. All right. So now I definitely want to finish out with either questions or any requests. If there's anything specific that you want to see with this, I didn't really mention at all that this has a stroboscopic mode. I would love to display that, but it is impossible in daylight in my studio to get like a 1-second exposure without completely blocking out all the windows, in which case then I wouldn't really be able to do a great live stream because you wouldn't be able to see anything in here. So I can't really illustrate stroboscopic mode all that well, but stroboscopic mode is when your flash fires multiple times during a single exposure, and it's how you can carve a subject out in multiple places and show a sequence of events in a single exposure, which is really cool. See some mentioning the sudden workouts there. All right, I don't see any questions here or any new questions that I have not answered. do have a question about the mount. Like all of the AC equipment and a majority of the Godox X series lighting, this is Bowens mount. So we can connect this to any Bowens mount modifiers. During the session, we were using the Godox P90. That is their parabolic softbox. That's what was connected to this for those action shots. But whether it is Bowens mount reflectors, Bowens mount softboxes, Godox softboxes that are for Bowens mount, those will all fit on the QT1200. And I do also want to reiterate, I know I mentioned this briefly at the beginning, but in case you're just coming in here, there is only one type of power option or one voltage option with the QT1200 Model 3. On the QT1200 2 Series or the QT2 Series, 400, 600, and 1200, there were 2 different options available. So you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to be concerned about that with the Model 3 version. All right. Well, if there are no more additional questions, I will go ahead and wrap up here. I will be monitoring the comments here and make sure that I'll slide back in and go through and comment any additional questions that pop up here. So thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the future.